Welcome, everyone, to Productside's latest webinar, Optimizing for the Agent Era. We'll hang out for just a moment to give people a chance to join. But in the meantime, if you could put your location in chat, it's always fun to get to know where everybody is connecting from.
Well, we've got a global audience here. So,
Denmark, hey, Ron, good to see you. It's been a while. Awesome. We got Portland, India, Denmark, Chicago. Excellent. Great. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Now we're getting some good folks coming in.
all
So
right, you
welcome
want me to
again.
go to the first slide or the
Yeah,
first?
yeah, we're good. Welcome again to Optimizing for the Agentic Era. My name is Roger Snyder. I'm a principal consultant and trainer here at Productside, based in the Santa Cruz Mountains in California. And today, our main attraction is Tom Evans, principal consultant and trainer based in Austin, Texas. Say hello to the people, Tom.
All right, hello everyone. Looking forward to taking you through this webinar and have lots of great questions for us along the way. So we're looking forward to this.
Absolutely. First, a couple of admin items. If you're not familiar with Product Side, we used to be called 280 Group, and we've been in the business of helping the product management discipline for over 25 years. And we are very much focused on outcomes, helping you in your personal outcomes, in your career growth, helping enterprises get better at producing excellent products. And in so doing, they are creating better outcomes for their customers. So that's our focus. We love to help enterprises transform, and we are experts in the field, but we're invested in your future. We want to see you succeed. And that's what really warms our heart is when we hear our success stories from both individual students as well as from the enterprises that we work with. We do want this to be interactive. Tom has got lots of great information for you, but we want to hear your questions. And we would love to also be able to have people chime in with their observations in the chat. But please put your questions in the Q&A box. We've got this highlighted on that screenshot. Go down to Q&A, throw your questions in there, and we'll either answer the questions at the moment if it feels like there's a good break in the action to do that, or we'll hold some of the questions to take at the end in our Q&A session. Our number one question that we receive is, hey, can I watch this later on? And the answer is yes. When you signed up, we received your email address and we will send you a follow-up email with a link to the recording so that you are able to follow up and listen to this later on and share it with your friends. And we also encourage you to join our LinkedIn group. It is an organization, a group now of over 40,000 product management professionals. It's a great place to hear the issues that other folks are facing, great place to ask questions, find out what the important topics of the day are, and network with your peers. So point your phone at that QR code or join us at linkedin.com/company/productside and join this vibrant community to continue to share your ideas and sharpen your skills. And with that, I will turn it over to Tom, who is going to take us into the world of AI and agents.
All right, excellent. So we're going to cover a couple of topics. First is just create an understanding of the world of AI and agents and understand what the current state is, some of the trends that we're seeing. Then we want to get into more specific about what are some things you might consider as product managers, product leaders in using agents as your digital teammate. And then finally, we're going to wrap up with here are some suggested steps in terms of if you haven't started moving toward using agents, what are some first steps that you can take to start down that journey of using agents? So let's first jump into this understanding the world of AI and agents. So if you kind of look at how things have evolved over the past few years, I think for many years, up until about 2022, we were stuck here in source-oriented work, where we as humans were responsible for searching through disparate sources of information and assembling that together into insights. And I think, as all of us know, that has been a very tedious process. And that's whether you're looking at internal data and trying to assemble and bring together internal data, or going out and looking externally for data and trying to create some understanding and insights from that. Well, with the growth and the maturing of Gen AI, generative AI, we're really kind of more in a world of intent-oriented work. And this is where we communicate the intent, to Gen AI, and it goes out and does the work search for us, brings that together, and can help us to synthesize that. And so already we're seeing our ability to accelerate the work, maybe to even do a deeper level of work just through the capabilities of generative AI.
Hmm.
But that's not where it's stopping. And this is where we really start to get into the purpose of this webinar is now we are moving more into a position where we can delegate that intent work, where we can go and work with an AI agent, leverage that with it, leveraging the underlying generative AI capabilities, and actually execute the task, moving us toward the intent or the goal of what we want to be able to accomplish. And so it's starting to do some of that on its own, or with us, with our guidance, but doing it automatically for us. And so
Hmm.
that is a huge step forward. But then there's kind of I don't even know that this would be the ultimate, but it's the next big step forward is outcome oriented work. And this is where agentic AI pursues a goal for us. And so in this case, it does work fairly independently. And I'm going to talk about the two differences here in a little bit, but I just wanted to set us up with the journey that we have been going through and where we see that journey moving forward in terms of the work that we do as product managers. But let's first do a quick poll here. So Roger's going to launch that poll. So the question here is, how are you currently using AI for product management work? And so there's four answers there. Not using AI. Two is we're still exploring, which means we're still testing it and getting a sense of where we can use it and where we can't use it. And that's really talking about generative AI. I use Gen AI daily, something that I use on a regular basis. And then the fourth one here is we have built AI agents to automate tasks. So those are the four ones. We just want to get a sense here of where you are. And if you haven't started using AI, that's okay.
Hmm.
We work with clients across industries, and we have clearly seen evolving maturity, or evolving what do I want to say, different levels of implementation in terms of AI. And some, where there's higher risk in the industry, or maybe they are less of a technology organization, are usually in that earlier stages where some of the big tech companies are much more advanced in terms of that usage. Well,
Hmm.
Roger,
Yep.
I think we got some pretty good results there. So why don't we go and in that?
Hmm. And
I'm going to
share those
end
results.
that and share the results.
Hmm.
And so it's, you know, it's interesting here that I think almost 40, just over 40% responded that they are
Right.
still exploring the use of AI. And so that's really interesting to see. But I'm also impressed that we have 17% that they have built
Yeah.
AI agents to automate tasks. And so I'm really excited to see that. That's actually a bigger number than what I would have expected to see, but that is excellent.
Absolutely. Yeah. And hopefully we'll hear from them in chat about what they're doing when the time is
Yeah,
right.
yeah, I think that's something that will pose up there as we get up to that point.
Yeah. Great.
So we're going to focus here primarily on the internal usage of AI agents, and I'm going to show you a slide here in a moment. But the reality is that implementing AI agents into our products is still in a fairly early stage. It's not saying that it's not being done and there aren't some clear use cases around it, but we're a little bit slower in doing that. We are much faster in using AI agents within our own work environments. And a lot of that has to do with the control that we have over our internal environment. So we have control, clear control over the data. We have control on how they get implemented and rolled out. But as soon as we start putting the agent capability into a product that we're responsible for, I'm not saying we don't have control because we still need to have the control, but we're still figuring out how to have that control. And so using AI agents internally is really a great learning field for us in terms of thinking about where can we start to use AI in our products in the future. So I think that's kind of that biggest part is that we have that tighter control there, and so um, and I'm going to show you some stats to support this as we go through this.
Right. But it's a safer sandbox, right? To
Yeah,
get
it is.
used to
Exactly.
agents,
Yeah.
right?
That's a great way
And
to say it is that your internal is really kind of a sandbox to explore and learn, apply, and then be able to understand where you need to put those guardrails in place, what those rules are, where you have to worry about data sensitivity
mhm,
before you start implementing it into a customer facing product.
absolutely.
Okay. So you notice that early on, I talked about AI agents and agentic AI. And there is a strong tendency, I think, when we talk agents, just to talk about them to get everything together. But not everything is agentic AI. And what we're going to do is give you an explanation around that. So, first, here's a definition around the AI agent. So, it's an autonomous application that uses reasoning and tool to execute task or workflow. And if you remember when I was talking about this transition that we were going
Mhm.
through, that we talked about delegation. And so that's really what you are doing when you are working with an AI agent is you are delegating a specific set of tasks to it. Okay. It has your still under your supervision. It's still under your control. It's launched when you want it to. And so, yes, it can take action and it can do many of the actions that we could potentially do manually, but it doesn't have what do I want to say? It doesn't have full authority to make decisions at the end. It is really more focused on executing the tasks that you have defined it to be able to do, or executing a workflow, if you want to use that terminology.
Mhm.
Now, here is where we'll talk about agentic AI. And in this case, this is a system or workflow that has autonomous decision making across multiple steps without having that human input. And this is becoming goal oriented. So we are more telling it, here is the goal that we want you to achieve and enabling it to figure out the best way to execute on that. And so that we create a strong sense of autonomy. Now, yes, we still might create some structure and workflows around it, but it still has a lot of autonomy in terms of making the best decisions to execute that work and how it's going to and the decisions that it's going to get made. And so if we want to look at what are the key differences here, or what really defines agentic AI, that first one is human or autonomy, where it can
Mhm.
execute without having to rely upon regular reviews, and commands by the human. So it takes out a lot of the human interaction.
Mhm.
That goal orientation. So it determines what are the best actions based upon that goal. Where if you think about a standard workflow, so if I was to create an AI agent that had a standard workflow to it, it would be more focused on the task to accomplish the goal, and it would follow the defined task that I ask it to define. But it would not have that autonomy to figure out what are the
Right.
tasks to be able to get to that.
Right. That's a good distinction, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think
Just,
I think in a way, those two plus number four, the decision making,
mhm.
and that ability to evaluate options and take action, are really some of those key differentiators. Now, the context aware, and I think, if I'm working, depending upon the GPT, there's always some context that we want to have, but it can leverage the new context that it gets to help it adapt in terms of pursuing that particular goal, where a AI agent, just as it is, wouldn't be able to do that. Now, here's one of the key, and this is with any agents that you're working with, whether it's what we would call an AI agent or agentic AI, is that sense of accountability. So we got to make sure there's clear guardrails around it that it cannot step outside of. And I think that's probably, one of our key challenges is figuring out exactly where that accountability is.
Yeah, that's the balancing act, right? You
Yeah,
want to give it some autonomy,
right.
agency, but you also don't want it to, run up your credit card balance without your
Exactly.
control.
Yeah, you don't want it to go on that shopping spree for you.
That's right.
Even though it knows how much you want to, get by those things, we don't want it to just go on the shopping spree, right?
Exactly right.
Yeah. So one of the things, and I want to tell this just because there's a historical context here, but years ago, are you hearing me okay, Roger?
I hear you fine.
Okay, I saw my internet warning pop up for just a moment. But years ago, and this would have been in the early to mid 1990s,
Mhm.
there was this popularity around intelligent agents.
Hmm.
And I I actually remember giving a presentation in business school where
Hmm.
we talked about intelligent agents and we
Right.
gave it a scenario of planning a trip.
Hmm.
And so if you think about that, you say, I need to plan a trip to London. And so you say, plan the trip to London. And the agent would be able to go out and maybe even spawn other agents to be able to go and find, flight reservations for you, look at hotels. Hopefully, you've given it some guardrails and some guidelines, or it has learned over time what your preferences are in terms of plan how you like to travel and how you like to make your reservations and things like that. So that we actually gave a whole demonstration thinking through that.
Hmm.
Well, guess what? That was a little bit early in the life of intelligent agents. Here we are now, 30 years later, and this stuff
Right.
is actually now starting to move, to that sense of reality.
Hmm.
And I'm guessing a lot of it is because you know, the technology wasn't there, and especially the agentic capability, but it's probably we didn't have the capabilities around a lot of these five areas that we want to make sure that we understand and apply with AI agents.
Absolutely. Right.
So let's get in talking about making agents your digital teammate. And so when we think about it, is that I think the key here is that idea of making it a teammate. Now we recognize that it is not a human, and
Hmm.
you're not going to have the same human teammate relationship with it, but yet we want to treat it as a teammate because it's going to help us do things more productively than what we have been able to do before. It's going
Hmm.
to be walking side by side with us, depending upon the way that we are implementing those. And so part of that means let's make sure we have a clearly defined role, we have clear expectations around it. And even with an agent, is set some guidelines in terms of when it should start escalating and coming back to me as a human,
Hmm.
saying, what is the next step that you need me to be able to take? And so this is where that governance and accountability starts to play an important role even if I'm just talking AI agents and I'm not talking about agentic AI. And you can see some, samples here of how agents are being used. And really, this could be, some both for internal usage or external usage. But these are just some examples, and we're going to get into some more product management specific examples here in just a moment.
Hmm.
But what I want to do here is to highlight, the state of adoption around AI. And so, if you go back to the very first question that we ask is if we think about just generative AI, 78% of organizations are using AI in at least one function, where 71% are using it regularly across key business functions. So this actually aligns pretty well to the results in
Hmm.
this survey, where I think there were about 40% that said we're still exploring. And yes, that pretty close to what we're seeing here in terms of just generative AI.
Right.
But then when we look at the usage of AI agents, you see that 62% of organizations are piloting AI agents, but only 23% of those are even starting to scale AI
Hmm.
agents. And so again, falls somewhat close to what we saw in the poll. I think maybe a little bit lower, or the poll was a little bit lower around the
Right.
piloting side of it. And so the message I want to send here is, one is if you're not using agents or you're not even using generative AI, yes, you might feel a little bit behind, but there are reasons there, and companies are taking their time in terms of how they're implementing that. And so there's lots of growth opportunities still existing around those.
Right.
If we talk agentic AI, very much in the pilot phase. And so
Hmm.
you're not going to see any discussions of companies scaling that out in any way. So there's a lot of learning about that because of the five reasons that we've already talked about.
Right.
So when we start looking at these challenges of AI adoption, I think some of these things are what you have seen come up in conversations internally. And so one is, do I get good results with it? And as much as AI has improved over the last 2 years, you can still get results that are not accurate. And so
Hmm.
that's definitely a risk that we want to keep in mind. We all have concerns around data privacy and security. So even using Gen AI within internally within an organization, you're going to want to make sure that the data that you're using is not being put into training models, that it's not being, made available to others in ways that we don't want that to be the case.
Right.
There's always the boy, I can't even speak, ethical and legal issues. So, is it being used in a way that creates bias, or is there ways that it's putting us at risk? But here's one of the things, that last one is probably one of the bigger barriers, and it's going to be a big barrier both under generative AI and AI agents, is that integration and training. And so,
Hmm.
yes, that could be integration into the tools that we have within the organization, but even more importantly, is making sure that everyone in the organization is properly trained and enabled in how to get the best use out of AI.
Right.
And
That.
so I'm going to guess, Roger, I'll ask you this question, but a lot of mine has been through just experimenting and learning
Hmm.
without a lot of formal training. And, we all have to admit, Dean Peters on our team has definitely led the way in many ways of looking at AI. And so he's definitely had a chance to influence and guide us. But
Absolutely.
yeah, I would say organizations are still figuring out how to formally roll it out and get everybody using it in a consistent manner. So that's,
Yeah.
those are just the Gen AI challenges right there.
Yeah, completely agree, Tom. And I'll chime in. I've been using AI for a couple of years now, right? And I use it every day. But even now, right? I was using it to prepare for a different webinar a few weeks back and asked for some information go scan the web, find some great product management thought leaders that I could recommend. And it came back with a nice list of 12 folks in four different categories. And one of the categories, it totally missed it. It missed.
Mhm.
And it missed on two of the three participants in that category. And I was like, what the heck? It was such a fiction. And it's good because, I've been in this industry a long time and I know these folks, but I still wanted to get a sense of like, are there some new names out there,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
But once I did it, then I was reminded I need to double check all 12 of these and make sure that what it was characterizing as this person's a source of truth about process, this person's a source of truth about leadership. I had to double check all that because he got two of them completely wrong and put them in the
Hmm.
wrong category altogether. So you
Yep.
have to actually hone your critical thinking skills and draw upon your own knowledge in order to supplement and double check everything that AI is bringing to you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I saw a video, and it's been a couple of weeks ago, and it was just like a really short blurb, but the person, it was a military officer, was speaking to, the use of AI within the military.
Hmm.
And he said, as, military professionals, and this applies to us as product managers, he said, you still have to understand first principles.
Hmm.
And that is absolutely the case for those of us in product management, is that we still have to be the owner of first principles and understanding and being able to evaluate whether we're getting a result that makes sense or not, whether it truly applied the skill sets that we want to apply.
Right.
And we see this in our training course where we have prompts that we use, and AI will still give you a result that isn't aligned to the first principles that we're teaching. So
Right.
yeah,
Absolutely.
we have to have that. All right, well, let's jump on here to agents. And I think,
Hmm.
these things are some things that we have already talked about, especially that control and oversight. But with agents, there's definitely that extra level of integration. Because if I can't integrate into the tools that I'm using or the databases that I'm using or the, enterprise systems that I'm using, you're gonna miss out on the value of it.
Hmm.
And so AI agents definitely have to have that ability to integrate. We have to know they're reliable, that they're going to give consistent results, that they're going to work as expected. They're not always going to air out on us. Um, and I do think that last one is something that people are still evaluating. And we'll
Oh
talk a
yeah.
little bit about the ROI at the very end, but that is something that people are still looking at and trying to understand and verify the ROI. And I know that as we have done research, that is a question that keeps coming up. We've made this investment in AI, and whether that's just Gen AI or into agents, but we're still having a hard time figuring out how to measure that ROI.
Very true.
All right, well, let's talk about some PM use cases here. And these are things that real world that are going on. So auto generating release notes. Wow, doesn't that sound great to be able to go and grab your tickets that you worked on or the whatever you developed and just have it auto generate a first set of release notes.
Hmm.
Transcribe and create structured summary of VOC or stakeholder calls. And this is one that I used recently in terms of building up. I had about 25 different interviews, and I knew a lot of the key themes I wanted, but I wanted to get it spelled out. And so I used AI in that case. I didn't use an agent necessarily, but I
Hmm.
did use AI. But I could see where if I were having to do this on a regular basis, then
Right.
that would an agent would have been perfect. The
Hmm.
third one is another one that I've heard a fair amount of talk about is taking the different inputs that you get from your different channels and triaging that and categorizing that, helping you to identify where are priority opportunities for us to be able to, focus on in terms of our development work. Sprint planning. So, checking, making sure tickets are ready, make sure we understand the dependency, maybe even do some estimating for us. And I think, as we start looking, I guess it kind of falls into the triage side of it too, is often there's tickets that are very similar. And so
Right.
helping identify those, merge those together.
Hmm.
Stakeholder reporting. So being able to uh, automatically create a report for us instead of us having to do that manually, whether that's daily or weekly or monthly. And then regular updates on market research and competitive analysis. So those are another area. And here's the good news is that some of the tools out there that you're using on a daily basis are already starting to integrate in some of these capabilities. So, some of the well-known ones like Atlassian, Otter, Granola. Granola is one that I hear a lot about. Product Board, GitHub, those are all integrating those in. And if you start looking at Copilot and Claude, just the capability to build out agents in those is improving a lot. So I think
Absolutely.
you're starting to see, and Roger, you and I think talked about this a little bit,
Hmm.
is, if you look at even some of the original building out of AI agents, it was, you almost had to be some programming and technical knowledge to be able to do that.
Right.
And now it's getting to where you don't have to have that level of detailed knowledge. And,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and I'm not going to promote any particular products, but there are definitely some products that I think are, really a great step forward in terms of enabling that.
Yeah, with a recent customer that I took on it was an industry I wasn't familiar with. I set up an agent to send me a morning email that would
Mhm.
summarize for me what's been going on for that customer across their various industries. And it wasn't just a summary of, well, here's all of the hits in terms of news. I also asked it, tell me what the product management implications are for each
Mhm.
of these pieces of news, and did it across three different divisions. And it was very helpful to be able to get that morning update and just see, okay, great, that's helping me better understand their customers, their markets, what's going on, but also things that I would then be able to mention during the training about the product management implications of all the things going on in their industry. So it was
Excellent.
really
Yeah.
helpful.
And you could have done that yourself manually, right? But that would have taken
Sure.
you, what, 30 minutes each day or whatever to
Right.
do that.
Especially the thinking about BPM implications, right? But it landed in
Yeah.
my inbox every morning at 7:30. It was
Yep.
very helpful.
Awesome. Yeah. And one of the things here when we start looking at these use cases is there needs to be high volume. Okay. And
Hmm.
at least for the big internal ones, having structured data. And so, like what you talked about wasn't necessarily coming from structured data. So, if I'm doing market research or competitive analysis or even some of the VOC, that's not going to be as structured, though there's definitely a little bit of structure to it. But,
Yeah.
in a lot of these other ones, you really do have to have that structured data in place to be able to work from. And so, those are where those first opportunities for agents are going to come up. And I want to use this moment here. I know that there were, five people that said they are using
Hmm.
agents. If you don't mind, just put in the chat window, what you are doing in terms of using agents. So I'm
Yeah.
not going to sit here and wait, but go ahead and put those in, and we'll look at that here in just a minute.
Absolutely.
Well, when we are defining an agent and how we would like to use an agent, think about this as that agent journey map. And no matter which agent you're using, whether it's Claude or Copilot or any of the other ones,
Open
and
claw.
yeah,
Yeah.
OpenClaw, yeah, whatever it may be,
Lovable. Yeah.
Lang, whatever,
Hmm.
all of those, would follow the same type of decisioning that you would need to go. And so, what data are you looking for? What data do you need the agent to be able to get access to? And are there any constraints or governance? We show governance here, and as slice three, but really that governance question applies, throughout this. So, what is there governance in terms of what kind of data that it can get access to? What is the orchestration that you want to have? What does that process look like? And I think it's easy for us to want to just jump to what is the process I want to do? And maybe we don't take the time to sit back and say, what is the data that is required? And
Mm.
where is that data going to come from? Do we have the data? Is it properly formatted, et cetera? So, that's where each of these steps are so important. And then that governance. And so this is where we start to put some of those guardrails in place in terms of what's acceptable, what's not, where are the boundaries in terms of what it gets orchestrated and actually what we actually output on there. And so, like I said, the governance can go into all of these phases. And then when we deliver the output, what does that look like? So, do we have a specific output format? Does it have to be in a specific detailed way? Who are we going to send that to? Okay. And so, for example, Roger, you talked about setting up your agent. I
Hmm.
set up a similar one for some competitive analysis work. And
Mm.
in that case, I didn't actually specify and say, here's exactly the format I wanted to look in. The agent has the flexibility to do that. But it's
Hmm.
possible, especially if I have some templates that I need to use, I would want to give it a specific format and say,
Right.
need to present it in this particular way. And
Yep.
then finally is that inspection. And so we want to make sure that as this agent is executing, that we're making sure that the data is valid, that we're not violating any of the governance, we're not creating any risk issues with it. So again, following that. So no matter what tool you go into, these are 5 steps that you're going to want to be able to follow.
Absolutely. And in terms of the output format, that was actually the hardest part of the agent that I set up because of the integration. To your earlier point about all the integrations, right?
Mhm.
It kept sending non-formatted emails into Outlook to then send me. And so it was just one long string of the entire thing. I had to teach it a little bit using a little bit of Markdown and a specification of like, look, I want this to be an HTML format. And here are, like, I'd like this header and then this header and this header, right? It was only 4 additional lines, but it took me a while to realize what was going on and get that output correct, right? So
Mhm.
you do have to play and tinker with these things.
Yep. Excellent. Okay, let us get into this question around measuring ROI. And I want to say, as I walk through this, I think, yes, so it will kind of be like obvious. Yes, that, those are all things. So, like decision velocity. And this is one of the things that I learned years ago that, and I had a product that part of that value proposition was that ability, even without being AI driven, was part of that ability to be able to go and make faster decisions.
Hmm.
Now, how can I connect that into a true ROI? And I think that's probably and you have a strong sense that when we can make higher quality decisions, when we are able to make those faster, that's going to give us a financial benefit. And,
Absolutely.
and I'm going to have to honestly say though, is how do you actually measure that? Can you actually track
Mhm.
that? Can you, find the correlate, the causation really probably more than just the correlation to say that is happening. But it's definitely something to be thinking about is how can I actually track that? The time saved, I think that's probably the one that stands out the most to us is the number of hours saved. And, for any of these, you're going to have to do some benchmarking up front and really think about how much time am I or how much time are our teams spending doing these tasks in a manual way. And then once you implement the agent, start identifying how much time, how fast is it getting done? And has it actually reduced the time that it takes us to complete that work? Removing work. So, if I have other people, for example, contractors that are currently doing something for me, am I able to go and justify it just by that reduction in the expense? Or maybe we have other tools that are helping us.
Right.
And then that throughput increase. Now, I want to be careful here. I know Roger, said this something to me about, be careful here about focusing on the output because we don't want to just do output. We don't want to just increase more tickets or more features or more capabilities. But if we truly are able to increase those and they also have strong value associated to it, then yes, we can definitely see that ROI from that. And I think probably the next step especially for those of us that have digitally oriented products. We want to be able to go and correlate that, yes, as we launch these new features, we got better product outcomes for our customers, and we're
Right.
actually able to see a faster improvement around some of our business outcomes, which could be around, adoption, retention, working
Hmm.
channel, what I want to say. There's a word I can't think of, but moving through the buying channel.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, okay. Yeah. Velocity.
Conversion rates, yeah.
Right, right. So there was a good question there's been several great questions in Q&A. Some I'm going to save for later. One I want to talk about right now. Ron Lichty asks, don't we need to measure changes in quality as well? And I would
Yeah,
say
yes,
yes.
you do.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean that would definitely be part of what we're looking at. And I'm not sure yet I have a way of telling you how to measure that changing quality. I
Hmm.
know in the work that I've done in some of my product management work, this would probably be the closest that I would go to. And I guess this would probably the right direction is to create a rubric. And when you
Hmm.
think about a rubric, it has a set of criteria in there that allows you to measure what that level of quality is. And
Right.
so that would probably be the direction that I would point you in, is in terms of establishing a rubric that gives you that ability to put it into at least a category in terms of that quality of work.
Absolutely. Right. And then the follow-up question was, shouldn't we be measuring outcomes, not just output, which we mentioned, but like
Right.
that
Yeah.
decision velocity is also decision quality, right? So let's
Yes. Yes.
see
Uh-huh.
if we're getting better results of that. And I'll cite a specific example. 2 weeks ago, while on a business trip, I was reminded that I was supposed to be giving a presentation that evening for a school board function outside of my daily work. I used AI to generate that deck in a quarter of the time it would have normally taken.
Mhm.
But not just that, it also, because I fed it all the right information, it also summarized good points that I might have forgotten to put into the deck. And
Mhm.
it also, in fact, reminded folks because it was about using AI. So it's kind of meta, right? I was using AI to write a deck to explain how to use AI in the educational settings, right? So it was a little meta, but it was great because it helped, for example, talk about all the right guardrails when we're talking about student data and
Hmm.
talking about student and teacher interactions that I may have forgotten to do myself. So it really
Hmm.
did lead to a better quality presentation that was more comprehensive in terms of the points that I wanted to make, but I might have forgotten to make if I hadn't had those reminders.
Yep. Yeah, and I love that line, and we might be getting off topic a little bit, but just in using AI in general, I am finding that the GPTs are getting so much better at prompting or suggesting those gaps or identifying
Hmm.
those gaps for me.
Right.
And the other thing that I do is I have found using the question of as I'm entering a prompt to say, is there any other information that you need from me to be able to
Right.
do this? And I just find that the quality of, that quality of of the response it gives me goes up because it did ask those clarifying questions, and it made me think and answer those. So
Absolutely. Great examples. And that flows through to agentic AI as well.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It would definitely fly through into AI agents also. So,
Hmm.
all right. Well, let's go and get into this starting point. Again, if anyone has any examples of AI agents that they're using, I'd love for you to put that into the chat window. But we're going to do our second poll here. And so we talked about some different use cases for using AI agents. So out of these six here, where do you think you can best use AI agents? So if you think about your work, think about it in terms of it's repetitive. We have access to data, things that, come across as strong pains for you yourself. Um, just kind of think about some of those and where you might be able to most use AI agents in your day-to-day product management work.
I'm going to let the dog out, Gus. Or I'll be right back, Tom.
Okay.
He's scratching on the door.
All right, let's see here. Give just another 10 seconds on this for a few more of you to respond. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So I probably went through that faster than 10, but we got a pretty good response rate there. So let's just share the results here. So almost half market research and competitive analysis. And I would have to admit, Roger, even based upon our discussion here, that is probably one
Right.
of the low-hanging fruits that doesn't take a lot of additional work. There's not a lot of integration that you have to do, and so those are the type of
Right.
agents that are fairly easy to set up.
Right. Makes sense.
Yep.
And definitely my experience as well. But yeah.
And then the next two were equal there, so almost 20%. Synthesize disparate data sources for customer insights and
Hmm.
automating reporting and updates. Now, I would agree. I think those are ones that stand out as high leveraged opportunities.
Right.
And a lot of that is just plain, for lack of a better word, is plain busy work that we as product managers don't really like to do, but is and being able to automate that would be fantastic. But those are both are great examples of where you have to have the data sources and the data integration in place. And
Right.
so that if anything, that might be the one barrier that gets in the place of implementing that. But I've definitely heard some good case studies, and there was somebody on Lenny's podcast talking about this just a month or so ago around how they used an AI agent to go out and look at customer tickets coming in, support requests, suggestions, and feature uh, requests from other people, and use an AI to kind of bring those together into a triage list for them to be able to work from. All right, let's get into our last couple of slides, and then we'll go into our Q&A.
Yeah, we've got some good questions.
So, how to get started? Well, I think this was a point that I was just making is, where is there a focus pain point? So one is that focus pain point, but I would also encourage us anytime we're getting into something like this is don't pick the hardest one to do, even though it has the biggest upside and it's a big pain. Don't pick the hardest one. Pick something that is going to get you to a quick win, because that quick win is going to be able to demonstrate not only to you, but to others in the organization, the value of using the agent. And it's also going to give you a quick learning opportunity of where I can take that first step in getting that agent implemented. Always be thinking about, one is, what outcome do we want to achieve? What is the goal of this? But what are
Yep.
the boundaries that we need to put in place? So if there are any boundaries, what are those things that we need to put in place? How do we manage governance? And so some of that can be governance about just tracking what the agent is actually doing, so that we can track back against those actions that the agent did. And then also having clear definitions in there in terms of escalation, is where this is when the agent should stop and wait for a human being to interact. And then ahead of time, this gets to the point discussion we just had around measuring that impact, measuring that ROI. And so one is, how do you benchmark that ahead of time? And then the second thing is how can you instrument the agent to be able to help you measure any of that ROI too? So wherever it can contribute to it, be thinking that if you do it as an afterthought, it's going to be much harder to do. So think about that ahead of time, and don't just jump to, oh yeah, this will do us better. Get that benchmark and then be able to track that.
Hmm. Yeah, I want to emphasize that point again.
Yeah.
Start with the
Okay.
end in mind of those of
Yeah.
the ROI. Very important.
Yeah. All right. So the last thing here is, how do we scale this? And I would definitely discourage us from trying to jump to a big, the full realm, knock a home run out of the park, from the very beginning. But a great way to start on that is having individual product managers, start building
Mhm.
out their own pilots.
Right.
And just like you, Roger, did something,
Mhm.
that's something that if others find it useful or interesting, that's something that could start to be scaled out across, an organization. And then you start to scale that out to a team. So let a whole team work on that. And you notice some of the things here, like read only. So, like, there's cases of where I
Mhm.
may just use it. So, like, the competitive analysis market research is primarily just a read only. We're not populating data back into other databases. Whereas you start to deploy it as a team, you're probably going to want to move in that direction, but that also has a higher level of work and risk associated to it. Then you can
Right.
start thinking about these cross-functional flows. So who are some of those initial cross-functional groups that you need to work with? And then you finally move into an agent first operating model with standardized templates. And so, think about that path. Don't try to just jump into it and scale it at once, but follow this. And I think as we look at any kind of implementation of new practices in organizations, this is typically really what happens is we find that we do some experimentation. Maybe we do a first case study or a pilot group, and then we start to find the opportunities to expand that out slowly.
Mhm. Excellent.
All
Great.
right. I am going to let you, Roger.
Yeah. So a couple quick things. Today you'll receive a link in the follow-up email or you can use the QR code that's right here right now to download this PDF of a survival kit for product leaders. This is aimed at when you are a product manager and being given a new product to work on, right? This is or you're just to say, hey, I need you to take over for this, or this is a whole new product we're thinking about, and yet it's a product that's underway. This is a way to use some AI tools to help you very quickly get a handle on where is the product, what's going on in the market situation, how do I be able to build up my understanding rapidly. And it's a great set of tools when you have to jump into a new product that is new to you anyway. So that is a great approach. So take that
Yep.
survival kit and try it out.
And I was going to say, just let me add on. It is very comprehensive. There's prompts included, but there's also the explanation and the context that is all in there. So it's a very comprehensive uh, uh, toolkit to work from.
Absolutely. Right. We've got some upcoming training. We've got, in fact, I believe it is Tom who will be
Yes.
providing live training in Austin in May. So you can use that QR code to sign up for live optimal product management training, which does include the usage of AI throughout the course.
Okay. Yeah. It is. We always have a great time here in Austin, so would love to see you here if that works for you.
Mhm. Our next webinar is Tom and Kenny talking about another AI topic of how do we use AI specifically for better analysis of jobs to be done, really getting a deep understanding of customer needs. And again, register today for that webinar using that QR code. I'm
Yeah,
moving quick
and
because
this
I want
one,
to.
this one's going to be a little different than most of our webinars. This is actually going to be a bit workshop driven.
Oh, all
And
right.
so we are going to teach you some concepts, and then you're going to go into a set of breakout rooms with other participants and spend time applying it. So this is actually going to be an hour and a half long, not just an hour long.
Oh,
So it is going to be a different experience, but we did this before and everyone loved it. So we're thrilled to do this again.
love the workshop style. That's fantastic. All right. And then upcoming courses. We've got more live online and in-person opportunities to join Optimal Product Management, as well as AI product management. So you can see those upcoming course dates. Just go to productside.com and look in courses, and you'll be able to see all of these courses and sign up. We look forward to having you join us. All right, we've got lots of questions, Tom. So let's
Yeah.
use the Q&A here. First up is Vinod Chandra. If we have structured data, then why can't we do automation instead of AI? Or how would AI be different compared to automation in the case of structured data?
Ooh, good question there. Yeah, so there are certain, and this is a consideration to always consider is that not everything requires AI to go and solve the problem. And so if you have good structured data and there is a clear, there's a word that I want, and I want a
Separation.
deterministic way
Hmm.
in terms of how you take that data, you bring the data together, you do calculations, whatever it may be, then I would say, yeah, I would not necessarily look at using AI to come up with, the to automate that. I have other ways in which I can automate that. But
Hmm.
there are definitely situations of where even if I have structured data, there's still more of a human decision making process that needs to be done in terms of how do I pull that together, the data? How do I synthesize it? How do I come up with a recommendation? So, for example, if I'm triaging inputs from various data sources around my product, well, yes, I can pull that in. I can't create a clear rule set that allows me to
Right.
go through and say, here's exactly how we're going to handle that. And that's where AI can learn from you and be able to implement those best practices to triage that and be able to give you an output that is something that you can go work from. So, yeah,
Hmm.
not everything requires, not all automation has to be AI.
Right. Absolutely. But I do
Great
think
question there.
the insight that AI can bring is a cut above in terms of automation, no question. So the next question is interested in what are the best generative AIs out there to run competitor and market analysis. And so Gemma, we get these kind of questions all the time, and the landscape is changing so fast that in fact in chat I put a prompt to use your favorite chat bot to get recommendations. And you can just change it to be about your specific case. You asked about competitive and market analysis. Mine was more about generating videos, creating content, and so forth. Just modify that prompt, but ask the AI to tell you, hey, and there are actually a couple of websites out there. One of them I wanted to show you actually is down for the moment, but hopefully it'll be back up. But it actually crowdsources votes on which are the best AIs for various tasks. But because this landscape is changing so rapidly, that's
Hmm.
why we hesitate to name names. Now, the next question, we will name a couple, but use this prompt, right?
Yeah.
So, and then the
Yeah, and
next question.
actually,
Go ahead.
Roger, I use this in a different context, but
Oh, yeah?
I was some personal things I wanted to work on, and I was
Hmm.
like, well, what tools would be the best thing for me to use? So this was a broad sense of tools,
Hmm.
and it gave, and the thing that I thought was interesting is that even though I was using one GPT, it was recommending other GPTs for particular aspects of
Hmm.
it. So, that
Absolutely.
doesn't mean that I, have the budget to go out and use all these different GPTs, but it was interesting to see that. And to Roger's point, yes, the landscape is moving so quickly. And if I, like even around AI agents, I will say as of today, Claude is the host of the town.
Hmm.
And Claude co-work in terms of building up agents tends to really
Hmm.
stand out. But it wasn't that way if you go back not too far back.
Right.
Claude wasn't it.
Right.
And so that landscape is moving so quickly. Uh, I think you just kind of want to keep your eye open.
Right. And I think OpenClaw is another one that I would mention as
Yeah.
well. So
Hmm.
Matthew mentioned, hey, you mentioned earlier you don't want to mention tools, but which tools could you recommend for someone to try as a first start? So those are a couple. OpenClaw,
Yeah.
I think Claude,
Claude.
Lovable. I think Lovable is particularly good for beginners because it is way more approachable in terms of its text-based approach. But there's
Right.
also Bolt and
So
Cozy.
just clarify, lovable from a creation of coding prototypes and things like that,
Hmm.
right? Yeah, not
Right.
not necessarily as an agent,
Right.
but yeah,
Right.
Claude and OpenClaw, the agent
Right.
tools of that are really quite powerful. So,
Absolutely. And then Ron asks a question we could take an hour on, but it is as a development moves from months to days, what's the impact on perhaps needing more product managers to identify the right thing to build?
ooh, this is. Will it? Here's the thing. So as the development is accelerating, I think what this is going to, the implication on this is going to be is how can you as a product manager better use AI to be able to keep up with that pace? And I think that is probably more likely the answer is that if your organizations are investing in using AI for the product, for the development side, there's going to be that strong expectation that you improve your skill sets, because coming to them and saying, I need more product managers to keep up with this pace of work, I don't think is going to sell very well. I think it's going to
Mm,
be, let us see you, demonstrate your productivity and how you use the AI tools. And I think just some of the things that we talked about, hopefully will give you some food for thought in terms of how to do that. Let's see, there
right.
was another point I wanted to make, but there's also going to be some questions around, does your role as a product manager expand a little bit? That is moving into additional aspects, like
Mhm.
maybe taking on a little more technical work or a little more user experience work. And that's
Right.
definitely some trends that we're seeing. I don't think there's an answer out there yet, but it's definitely some clear trends.
Yeah, I advocate for using AI to be able to have more direct voice of the customer work, right? To be able to put out even prototypes,
Yep.
concepts, explainer videos, all of those things that allow you to get more customer feedback more rapidly. So I
Yep.
do think that we are seeing product managers become more enabled by these tools for better research and better answering that question of what is the right thing to build.
Hmm.
Great questions. All right. Thanks, everybody. Wonderful interaction today. Great job, Tom. Thank you all. And we look forward, and I'm excited about that 90-minute webinar coming up that Tom is going to be taking us into actual workshop mode in a future webinar. So hope you found this useful. Look forward to seeing you all at our next webinar.
All right. Thank you. We'll see you later.